Hello. Enjoy the story. My wife Emma wasn't just having an affair. She had constructed an entire parallel life that I was only beginning to understand. The revelation came not through suspicious texts or hired investigators, but through pure chance. I overheard a conversation at our daughter's soccer game between two mothers who didn't realize I was within earshot. They were discussing Emma's upcoming trip to Hawaii with her new man, except I knew nothing about any trip to Hawaii. Poor James, one of them had whispered. He has no idea. The irony was that Emma and I had been planning our own Hawaiian vacation for our upcoming 15th anniversary. She'd been enthusiastically showing me resort brochures just that morning. When I confronted her that evening, Emma didn't cry or deny it. Instead, she laughed a cold, unfamiliar sound that made my skin crawl. "Finally," she said, setting down her wine glass. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." What followed was a confession that left me reeling. For the past 3 years, she'd been leading a double life with Richard, her corporate law firm's managing partner. The Hawaii trip wasn't their first. They'd been traveling together regularly under the guise of business conferences and client meetings. Our joint account had been funding their rendezvous. "You were always so trusting, James," she said, almost pitying. "It made everything so easy." The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing that the woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of our children, could speak about destroying our family with such casual cruelty. She outlined her plans matter-of-factly. She would be moving in with Richard, who had already bought them a penthouse downtown. She expected to maintain primary custody of our kids, ages 12 and 14, since Richard's connections would ensure the best lawyers. "Don't worry," she added. "You can have them every other weekend. Richard thinks that's generous." I sat there silently as she continued describing how she'd orchestrate the dissolution of our life together. She had it all planned out, the division of assets, the custody arrangement, even which friends she'd let me keep. Her voice droned on as I thought about our daughter's upcoming dance recital, our son's baseball championships, all the family moments that would now be tainted by her absence and betrayal. As she spoke, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Emma clearly expected me to break down, to beg her to stay, to fight for our marriage. Instead, I pulled out my phone and made a call that would change everything. "Hi, Amy," I said when my sister picked up. "Remember that conversation we had last month about the offshore accounts you found while doing the corporate audit for Emma's firm?" Emma's face went white. She hadn't known that my sister was the external auditor who had recently reviewed her firm's books, including the slush fund Richard had been using to finance their affair and several others. The documentation of their misappropriated client funds was extensive. "I think it's time to submit that report," I said quietly. Emma's composure shattered. The wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on our kitchen floor. For the first time that evening, real emotion crossed her face, raw fear. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Think about the kids." "I am thinking about the kids," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm thinking about how they deserve better than parents who teach them it's okay to lie, cheat, and steal." The next few hours were chaos. Emma alternated between threats and desperate pleas. She called Richard, who showed up at our door in an expensive suit, attempting to intimidate me with legal threats. I simply played him the recording of Emma's confession about the misappropriated funds. His face turned ashen. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Both of you." After they left, I sat in our family room, surrounded by photos of happier times. Our wedding day, family vacations, school performances. Each memory now felt tainted, making me question everything I thought I knew about our life together. The next morning, I woke the kids early and took them to breakfast at their favorite diner. They knew something was wrong. They'd heard raised voices the night before. I had promised myself I wouldn't lie to them or use them as weapons in this war. "Mom and I are going through some difficult things," I explained gently. "But I want you both to know that none of this is your fault, and we both love you very much." My daughter Ashley, always perceptive, looked at me with eyes too wise for her 14 years. "Is this about Mom's friend Richard?" My heart sank. "You knew." She nodded. "I saw them together at the mall last month. They were holding hands. Mom said it was a secret and I shouldn't tell you because it would make you sad. The rage I'd been suppressing threatened to explode. Emma had involved our children in her deception, forced them to carry the weight of her secrets. It was unforgivable. That afternoon, everything changed. The managing partners of Emma's firm called an emergency meeting. My sister's audit had revealed not just the affair, but years of financial misconduct. Richard had been embezzling client funds to finance his lifestyle and multiple affairs. Emma had helped cover it up. By evening, both Emma and Richard had been fired and reported to the State Bar Association. Their perfectly planned future imploded in hours. The penthouse, the fancy vacations, the cushy retirement fund, all gone. Emma showed up at the house that night, mascara streaking her face. "Please," she begged. "I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Richard. Just don't let them prosecute us." I looked at the stranger wearing my wife's face and felt nothing but exhaustion. "You should have thought about consequences before you involved our children in your lies." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings and painful conversations. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself, but watching our children process their mother's actions. Ashley threw herself into schoolwork, barely speaking at home. Tommy, our 12-year-old, started having nightmares. Emma's parents showed up unannounced one Sunday afternoon. I'd always had a good relationship with them, but now they sat awkwardly in our living room, searching for words. "We don't understand," Carol, Emma's mother, finally said. "She had everything, a beautiful family, a successful career. Why would she risk it all?" I couldn't give them the answers they wanted. Emma had told me she was bored, that she needed excitement. But how do you explain to parents that their daughter destroyed her family because suburban life wasn't thrilling enough? The hardest moment came when Tommy found Emma's journal while helping me clean out her home office. He brought it to me, tears in his eyes. "Dad, I think you should read this." The journal entries dated back 4 years. They detailed not just her affair with Richard, but her growing resentment toward our family life. She wrote about feeling trapped by motherhood, about envying her single friend's freedom. There were cruel observations about my predictability and lack of ambition, because I'd chosen to stay at my stable engineering job instead of chasing corporate success like Richard. "Your father is a good man," she'd written, "but good isn't enough anymore. I want more." Reading those words, something inside me finally broke. Not because of her criticism. I'd long since stopped caring about Emma's opinion of me. No, what broke me was realizing she'd had years to talk to me about her feelings, to work on our marriage, to make different choices. Instead, she'd chosen deception. That night, I sat down with Ashley and Tommy. "I found Mom's journal," I said gently. "I know you both have questions about what's happening. I think it's time we talked honestly about everything." For hours we talked. They shared their own observations and hurts, the times they'd seen their mother with Richard, the lies they'd been asked to keep, the confusion they'd felt. Ashley admitted she'd started seeing the school counselor because she didn't know how to handle the secret. "I wanted to tell you, Dad," she sobbed, "but Mom said it would destroy our family." I held my daughter as she cried, my own tears falling. "Your mom was wrong," I told them both. "Lies destroy families. Truth, even when it hurts, gives us a chance to heal." The next day, Emma's lawyer called with a settlement offer. She would agree to give me primary custody of the kids in exchange for not pressing charges over the embezzlement. She'd moved to California with Richard, who had family there. They'd both take plea deals on reduced charges. I thought about how Emma had planned to take the kids from me, how she'd used them as pawns in her game. Now she was willing to abandon them to save herself. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, Emma's settlement offer weighing heavily on my mind. The easy path would be to accept it, let her leave, protect the kids from a messy legal battle, start rebuilding our lives. But something about it felt wrong, like enabling her pattern of escaping consequences. That evening, I found Ashley in Emma's closet, clutching one of her old sweaters. "I hate her," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I miss her too. Is that crazy?" "No, honey," I said, sitting beside her. Love doesn't just disappear because someone hurts us. It's okay to miss the mom you thought you had, while being angry at the choices she's made. The next day, I declined Emma's offer. Not out of vengeance, but because I realized our children needed to see that actions have consequences, even when those actions come from people we love. Emma didn't take it well. She showed up at the house unannounced, causing Tommy to have a panic attack. When I tried to calm him down, she screamed that I was turning our children against her. The irony of her accusation wasn't lost on me. "You did this yourself," I told her quietly. "Every time you made them lie for you. Every time you chose Richard over them. Every time you made them carry the burden of your secrets." She slapped me hard across the face. As I stood there, cheeks stinging, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not love, not hate, but pure desperation. She'd finally realized she wasn't in control anymore. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found myself looking through our old photos again. There was one from our first apartment, Emma laughing as I tried to assemble IKEA furniture. Another from the hospital when Tommy was born, both of us exhausted but radiant with joy. I thought about the young couple in those photos, so full of hope and dreams. We'd promised to face life's challenges together, to grow together. Instead, Emma had grown away from us, chasing some fantasy of excitement and luxury that meant more to her than her family's trust. The next morning, Richard's wife Jennifer reached out to me. Apparently, Emma wasn't his only affair. There had been others, each facilitated by the embezzled funds. Jennifer had discovered a pattern stretching back years. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They're planning to flee to Mexico before the indictments come down. Emma's been liquidating assets and moving money offshore." I thanked Jennifer and immediately called my lawyer. Within hours, emergency court orders were issued freezing all accounts. When the police arrived at Richard's temporary apartment, they found packed bags and one-way tickets to Cancun. Emma called me from the police station, hysterical. "How could you do this to me? After 15 years of marriage?" "That's exactly why," I replied. 15 years of marriage should have meant something. Our children should have meant something. But they didn't, did they? The final hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. I sat in the courtroom, watching Emma and Richard face the consequences of their actions. Both pleaded guilty to reduced charges of financial misconduct. Emma would serve 18 months, Richard 3 years. Before being led away, Emma asked to speak with me privately. In a small conference room, under the watchful eye of her attorney, she finally broke down. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she sobbed. "The affair with Richard, it started as just a fantasy, an escape. Then it became real and everything spiraled. I lost myself somewhere along the way. I studied her face. The face I'd woken up to for 15 years. The face our children inherited pieces of. That's the problem, Emma. You didn't lose yourself. You revealed yourself." She flinched as though I'd struck her. "The kids," she began. "We'll have supervised visits once you're released," I finished. "If they want them. They're old enough now to make that choice for themselves." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift. Not because I'd won. There are no winners in something like this, but because the truth was finally fully exposed. No more secrets, no more lies. That evening, I took Ashley and Tommy to the beach where Emma and I had gotten married. We sat on the sand, watching the sunset, eating pizza from the boardwalk. "Dad," Tommy asked suddenly, "are you sad about Mom?" I considered his question carefully. "I'm sad about many things. About the choices she made, about the pain you both have experienced. But I'm not sad about standing up for what's right, or about choosing to face the truth, even when it hurts." Ashley leaned against my shoulder. "I used to think love meant never getting angry at someone. But that's not true, is it?"
No, eso es tie.
Real love means caring enough to hold someone accountable. It means being brave enough to face hard truths, and strong enough to do what's right, even when it breaks your heart. We stayed on the beach until the stars came out, talking about memories, fears, and hopes for the future. For the first time in months, laughter came easily. Not because the pain was gone, but because we were facing it together honestly and openly. Later that night, I found Emma's journal again. On the last page, she'd written, "Maybe one day they'll understand that I did this for me, because I needed more." I closed the journal and placed it in a box with other mementos from our marriage. Someday, when the kids were older, they might want to read it to understand their mother's choices. But for now, we had our own story to write, one of healing, growth, and the kind of love that chooses truth over comfort, courage over convenience. The next morning, I woke up early and started packing up Emma's remaining things as the sun rose over our neighborhood. Each box felt lighter than the last. Not because I'd stopped loving the woman I married, but because I'd finally stopped carrying the weight of her lies. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos. Bye. Thank you for listening.